morning, James. How are you?
Extremely well, thank you, Simon. Very, very well indeed. Very excited about our chat this morning. Didn't sleep last night. It was super exciting.
I'm sure. Listen, my last podcast, I had a shark on. I had Andrew Banks of Morgan and Banks fame, Talent 2. So it seems appropriate that we kick off with the Recruitment Transactions International's first podcast of the new year with a dragon, Enter the Dragon. So welcome, James. And you don't need much of an introduction. I was on your LinkedIn earlier on, and I was staggered to see that you have 3,464,119 followers as of kind of 10 minutes ago. So that's very impressive.
That's just family, Simon.
If you wouldn't mind, let's start at the beginning, as we always do with these things. And Alexander Mann is a business that you built and exited. It's a huge global business, AMS now. And I'd love to just ask you, briefly, really, just how you built it, a little bit about the exit itself, the value created, and just around that, if you could do it again, how would you do it differently, or what parts would you change?
Alexander Mann, as you can imagine, Simon, is super important to me because it was my first business. It's like your first child, your first baby, and the one I'm probably the most proud of and so passionate about. And also that the model and what it does is quite unique around the world in terms of its kind of RPO type structure. So Alexander Mann really was born, from a broom cupboard. So I started the business literally in a room the size of a broom cupboard, and there was me, the yellow pages, the phone, and began the journey with smiling and dialing. And back in those days, it was just the more calls you made, the more people you spoke to, and effectively built that business over time. Was it easy? Absolutely not. Did we make mistakes? More than you could imagine, because when you're breaking into a new market, a new product, a service that no one's ever had, it's not easy. There was nothing to compare with. There was no other competitors in the market. So everything we did was breaking ground. So I would say probably the most challenging, the most educational journey of my life, because creating something that nobody else has ever done, because when we launched, the RPO industry didn't even exist. Everybody's built on the back of what Alexander Mann was created in the market. So I'd say it was probably the most exciting part of my life and my journey.
Fantastic. And then the exit itself, how did that come about? Were you actively looking to sell the business at that point, or you just had people knocking on the door? How did that part come out?
The exit opportunity for Alexander Mann was quite an interesting one, because that particular year, which was 5 years before we did actually eventually exit, went to a corporate finance house, and we said we're currently making 3.5 million profit. I assumed because we were so profitable, we were saleable. When he looked at the business and asked a whole bunch of questions, realised that actually I didn't really have a proper management team. I didn't have a board structure. My infrastructure was quite loose. I didn't have an FD. There was no real reporting in the business. There was very little governance in the business. And what he said was, look, I think it's a great business and it's profitable, but nobody's going to buy it, because really it's the James Caan show. And recruitment businesses, when the business is entirely dependent on an individual, the truth is it's not saleable. So having had a huge disappointment, I then went away, and it actually took me over 5 years, Simon, to then rebuild the business in a structure that was more saleable, putting a management team in place, putting a proper board structure, having proper corporate governance, having a proper brand, having a marketing function, having proper L&D, having a proper FD, all of these things. It wasn't until we had got all of that in place, we were then able to find a buyer. And the interesting thing is, when we did have all of those things, the valuation was off the charts. What made me realise that too many founders like myself, we just focus on profit, thinking that once we've got profit, what we forget is the valuation. Profit is only one part of it.
Got it. Got it. The next sale, if you like, is very interesting for me because it's such a radical departure from what you achieved with Alexander Mann with what is now known as AMS in the sense that it's the Humana franchise, which was a global search franchise that you created from nothing, and intrigued to know how that came about and how you managed to keep quality of the franchise businesses across the globe. And again, linking to the exit, how did that come about, and how was that deal structured?
Humana was interesting because having built Alexander Mann, I wanted to do search, because search, as you know, in the world is always perceived to be a kind of a top-end product. And never having run a search firm before, I met my partner, a chap called Doug Bugey. I happened to be in America, and at that time, in the early 90s, MRI in the US were the number one executive search franchise. They had over 600 offices. It was a huge brand, incredibly successful, making absolute fortunes. And Doug had been with the firm for over 10 years. He was their vice president. And I was completely blown away by the concept of franchising an executive search business, which I'd never done before. I was really impressed with what MRI had achieved. Doug and I got together and said, why don't we do this globally? Because MRI was just a US business, and Doug's aspirations was to be a global business. So him and I launched Humana together, and the vision was to build the world's largest executive search practice. And we went on that journey together, and over a 7-year period, we established 147 offices in 30 countries around the world, making it one of the most successful search practices around the world. Doug was kind of relentless about his vision, his strategy, his quality, because you're only as good as the last transaction you did, and maintaining that culture, maintaining that quality was paramount, because if you didn't, you couldn't do the next one. And, over a 7-year period, we had a phenomenal journey. And how the exit came about was MRI obviously continued to become a huge business in the US. Doug had many, many friends on the board of MRI because he grew up there and he knew everybody. And the business, Humana's headquarters, was based in the UK, and he was an American. And each year at Christmas, he'd go back to the US to see his family. And one year he went back and had dinner with the founder of MRI, and he was telling them about what we were doing and how we just opened in Singapore and Malaysia and Hong Kong and Japan. And they were just absolutely baffled at how we'd grown. And they'd been around for 40 years and didn't have one office outside the US. And the founder of MRI, had this kind of light bulb moment to say, if you could merge MRI and Humana together, you've got the biggest brand in the US, you've got the biggest global brand, you bring the two together, and actually you create the world's largest search business. And, as they said in The Godfather, Simon, he made us an offer we couldn't refuse.
How did you grow? I mean, what's the magic behind that? Like, you must have had so many air miles, but how were you identifying? Because I guess in those days, the marketing's not like it is today, right? Like, how were you able to identify the right sort of caliber of franchise partners and instill the quality that you referred to that Doug was imbuing in these businesses? How did you do that?
But exactly what you said. There's nothing replaces hard work, Simon. It's literally getting on a plane, arriving in Singapore, meeting a lot of people, reaching out to people. Not easy. There's no shortcut. Today it's different with social media, etc. But in those days, it really was shoe leather. We physically went into every single country. We approached different people. We researched the market. We found founders that were running other businesses. And it was just doing the job, and not easy. Doug and I were literally on a plane every single week, meeting founders in Germany, in Europe, etc. In terms of quality, we had our headquarters in Windsor. In London, we had a team of people who evaluated and vetted in terms of systems, procedures, quality, reporting, etc. And we were relentless because we knew ultimately we were only as good as the brand we'd created. We were only as good as the people we had. And at the end of the day, we could never sell the business if the model wasn't successful and could demonstrate value and growth. And, we did a very, very good job. And the business became an incredible success. And when MRI acquired it, it then became part of the MRI business. It then had an opportunity where it could present itself as the largest global player in the search world.
Probably a lot of people might have thought you'd stop at that point. Two major exits, a lot of money in the bank, but you then went on to create the Human Capital Investment Group. My understanding is that was a group of businesses that you bought, and you put a wrap around them, and you were able to achieve a pretty phenomenal exit and a very good return on your investment and your efforts. Maybe you just want to add a little bit of color to that.
So how that really came about was, having now sold AMS and Humana, we generated quite a lot of capital, frankly didn't know what to do with it. And once I sold Humana, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And having left school at 16, never finished my education, decided to take a sabbatical. I went back to school. So I went to Harvard Business School and completed my education. And when I was at Harvard, the key buzzword at the time, everybody was talking about private equity, and how private equity was investing in all these businesses, something I'd never thought about, something I knew nothing about. So I basically took the capital from the two exits and founded my own private equity firm with actually my own money. I had no institutional capital, no third-party funding. It was simply my own capital. Created a brand called Hamilton Bradshaw, which is my private equity firm, took offices in London in Mayfair, and effectively wanted to do two things. I either wanted to acquire existing recruitment businesses where I could use my experience and knowledge of building Humana and Alexander Mann to show them how to scale, but also I was quite intrigued, Simon, in finding individuals who wanted to build their own recruitment business. So Hamilton Bradshaw's kind of platform was either invest in existing businesses or back founders who wanted to start their own. And effectively, and funny enough, looking back, it was actually the kind of creation, the birth of Recruitment Entrepreneur, because that was the kind of the trial run of how to do it. So through that activity, we effectively acquired 4 small businesses. These are businesses that have been going for anywhere between 5 and 10 years, had between 10 or 15 people, so by existing businesses, but they hadn't quite got to the scale they wanted. And we also backed 4 individual founders who started from scratch. So Hamilton Bradshaw effectively had this portfolio of 8 businesses in different markets, different sectors. And when we built that business, the total consideration that we'd invested to create that group of 8 businesses, I think was around 14 million in terms of the seed capital for the startups and the acquisition cost of the businesses we'd acquired. When we acquired that portfolio, it was probably doing around 2.5 million. And effectively, we grew that to 10.4 million EBIT. And effectively, we then created a wrapper called Human Capital Investment Group. And we took the group and all the portfolio of businesses to market. And we approached 20 private equity firms, with the view, would you want to acquire? And Graphite Capital, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the human capital space, loved the model, loved what we did, was amazed by the growth that we'd achieved from going from 2.5 million to 10.4 million. And they made us an offer to acquire the portfolio at 8.6 times earnings.
That's a high multiple. It's much higher than you would get if you were selling them individually. And how is that business doing today? Is it still with Graphite? And what are the EBIT numbers today, if you can share roughly?
Funny enough, I did actually have a look, because as you know, in the UK, when you have a private company, it is compulsory that each year that company has an audit, and the statutory accounts have to be uploaded to a government portal called Companies House. So actually you can simply just access the portal and you will see. And I did have a look, and the business last year did, I think, just over 20 million in EBIT. So since I sold, it's now doubled from 10.4 million to over 20 million. And I think one of the things, Simon, I'm very passionate about is as a founder, when you exit a business, it actually means a lot to me that the business continues to grow and build beyond what you sold for. I think a lot of founders, they sell the business and they've got the check and they move on, and it doesn't really matter. But actually, I really care because it's my legacy, it's my reputation, and I want to be known for somebody who builds quality businesses that don't fall apart after I've sold them. And if you look at Alexander Mann today is 10 times the size of the business I sold. When I sold the business, today Alexander Mann has got 8,000 employees. It operates out of 20 countries, and revenues were about 1.5 billion. It's gone beyond, and for me, it's my legacy, it's my reputation. I'm associated with that. But to be honest, there's a number of firms, as I'm sure you know, Simon, that the founder sells, the founder leaves, and the whole thing disintegrates, people leave, and the brand disappears. For me, I'm very, very conscious that I want to build a business where I have the right leadership team, the right management team that takes the business beyond me. It happened at Alexander Mann, it happened with Engage, or Human Capital Investment Group. Human Capital Investment Group today probably has, I think when I sold it, we had 400 people. I think it's got 1,000 today. It's double in EBIT, it's international, and graphite for them, it's a phenomenal investment. They'll make 4 or 5 times the investment they put in.
I'm sure they're very happy. Do you feel you sold too soon in some ways, or you mentioned that it has allowed you to port into Recruitment Entrepreneur, which is super exciting. How do you feel about that?
I get asked this question a lot, more about Alexander Mann, because it is so big today, that, did I just sell too early? If I kept it today, it would be worth. The last transaction, Alexander Mann has been sold 4 times since I sold it. So it's had 4 different buyers. The last buyer, Simon, paid over $1 billion for that business. Now, I got nothing like $1 billion for the business. So you could ask, did I sell it too easy or too early? And the answer is, it was the right decision at the time. I didn't have a crystal ball. At the time, the decision was right for me, and the price that I got, was the right price for the business. The question is, what has happened since the sale of Alexander Mann, and what I've done, some of the things that have happened in my life, I would never have done if I hadn't have sold. So actually, regardless to the monetary value, it was the right decision. I think with Engage, or Human Capital Investment Group, I probably did sell it too early, if I'm honest. It was a great business, it was a great brand, but we did get a fantastic price for the business. The multiple was great, and that allowed me to do some of the things that I did, after selling Human Capital Investment Group. So on reflection, I probably don't have regrets.
Got it. And with Recruitment Entrepreneur, you started in the UK, you're now international, and the growth has been truly phenomenal from what I've seen, what I've observed, what I've learned. Just describe that from us from the very first business or individual you invested in to where we are today with our business.
So the beginnings of Recruitment Entrepreneur really came from, Hamilton Bradshaw investing in founders. And we realised that actually we're quite good at that. We're very good at finding individuals who have this passion, this desire, who one day want to run their own business, but they need, they don't want to run a boutique. They don't want to just set up from home. They want to grow a real business. To grow a real business of scale, you need proper capital. So a lot of the founders that we meet, Simon, are people who are working in large corporates, are working for someone else. They've thought about running their own business, but the idea of having 3 or 4 people doesn't appeal. They want to build a business of 20, 30, 40, 50 people. To do that, they need more capital. So effectively, Hamilton Bradshaw, when we started, was providing that working capital. In addition to that, because my own background in recruitment, I've been there, I've done it before. So as well as providing the capital, the mentorship, the coaching of the founder, providing the infrastructure, the technology, the back office, the finance, the accounting, the IT systems, the legal, the compliance, all of those factors that we were able to provide founders enabled us to take the founder from what would have been a boutique to a real scalable business. So that really was the creation of Recruitment Entrepreneur. Recruitment Entrepreneur's vision was to become the world's largest investor in the recruitment industry. We spent 6 years developing the model in the UK, refining it, understanding it, how to scale it, how to build it, the technology, the platform, the branding, etc. After 6 years of a very successful establishment of the UK business, where we have over 30 different businesses that we've created, in 2022 we launched Recruitment Entrepreneur International with a view of being operating in 20 countries. Our vision was that in each country every year we would back at least 5 entrepreneurs to start their own business. If you've got 20 countries, that's 100 new businesses launched every year. Over a 5-year period, we estimate that by 2027 we will have over 500 businesses in the recruitment industry around the world.
Incredible. And what is the end game for you, James, with those 500 businesses if you achieve your goal of reaching that?
I think at that point we will become the world's largest recruitment organisation with 500 independent brands in every country in the world. The business at that point probably will be worth in the billions, and my vision would be probably to float that on either the New York Stock Exchange or the London Stock Exchange. Because the one thing I haven't done, despite all of my successes, is I haven't floated a business, because every time I've tried to float, somebody's come along and wanted to buy it. So I've never quite got there. So I think having, my journey to kind of complete that one outstanding mission, I think for me would be quite exciting.
Be amazing, 4th time lucky. So maybe we just dig a little bit into M&A, and 2 parts to that really. So when you invest in a individual or an early stage business, and there were several businesses you invested in, as part of the HCIG business, the Human Capital Internet Investment Group, and with Recruitment Entrepreneur. What are you specifically looking for in individuals and in that early stage business?
I think the first thing is I want somebody that has a vision to build something of scale. I want somebody who wants to build a legacy. I don't really want somebody who wants a lifestyle business, because the truth is they don't need me for that. So a founder that's got clarity of thought, that is a true market expert, who understands his market very well, who understands the sector, and he's a thought leader. Somebody who has the vision to grow and scale, to build a business of quality with professionalism. Somebody that has the ability to attract talent, because scale is all about your ability to find the right people. And if you have a founder that's got the ability to attract talent, he can make things really work. So we want somebody who's commercial, because at the end of the day, he's running a business. He's not a biller as such. He's got the responsibility and the accountability to run and manage a business. So we want somebody that has those ingredients, that if you then provide him with the right platform, the right investment, the right infrastructure, the right leadership, the right coaching, the right mentoring, together you create an amazing marriage.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me on to part 2, which is, what the seller looks for. And I know that you had a very successful exit last year of one of your portfolio businesses within Recruitment Entrepreneur, which is the Walter James, a life sciences business. So tell us a little bit about that, and specifically what the seller was looking for, and also what you think they should be looking for when they're buying a business of that sort of size.
That business, Simon, Walter James, was my 14th successful exit of a recruitment business. So I've done this many, many times before now. So I think I have a very clear idea of what a buyer looks for. And typically, from my experience, the first thing is, not to assume that the only thing that the buyer wants is profit. Profit is only one constituent of value. The second most important thing that the buyer looks for is a business that has a proper management team. Very few transactions have I seen in the market where businesses have not developed a proper management team, a proper board, where the founder's the chief executive, they've got a sales director, they've got a marketing director, they've got an HR director. The business has to have a leadership team that can take the business to the next level. The third thing is a business needs to have a training culture. If you're going to grow a business, and scale it to 20, 30, 40, 50 people, you have to train people, you have to develop people, you have to retain them. So having that training and infrastructure is important. Having a clear strategy on talent attraction, it can't be opportunistic. There has to be a methodology, a process, and collaterals and marketing. You have to demonstrate to the buyer, because the buyer only makes money, Simon, if the business can grow. The business will grow because you can attract talent. You have to show him how will you do that. The business also needs to have what we call, a focus in terms of revenue. A lot of businesses that come to market have what I call a concentration risk. Too much of the revenue is with too fewer clients. So what the buyer wants to see is a very good spread of revenue, so he's not taking an unnecessary risk. A lot of businesses that come to market also have what I call a concentration risk, where too much of the revenue sits with too fewer people. So making sure you've got a balance of revenue. The other thing a buyer looks for is to ensure that you can convert gross margin into profitability. And typically, my experience is, they want to see between 22 to 27% conversion. If you're converting at 40%, you're probably too lean, and that will put them off. If you're converting at 10%, your overheads are probably too high. So getting that balance right is important. The other thing the buyer wants is what we call productivity per head. Your business needs to have your revenue spread across a number of people, and they've got to be productive. We don't want the 80-20, where 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the workforce. You've got to show 3-year track record of growth. So just because you have one good year does not mean you're going to get the right multiple. You have to show consistency in growth. And finally, the buyer wants to know, are you a business can work to a budget and deliver a budget? Because his entire decision, Simon, of buying your business is believing in what your future forecast looks like. If you've demonstrated you've never hit a budget before, how will he believe that you can deliver in the future?
So all of those things were part of the Walter James business at the point of sale?
Absolutely. 100%.
Got it. Can I just shift gears a little bit and talk about something outside of recruiting, which is what a lot of people know you for this, is your experience with Dragon's Den, which is fascinating. And so often I talk to people, do you know James Caan? Yeah, I know, he's one of the dragons. It was a few years back, but how did that come about, and how did it help you, just with the recruitment and staffing business in general, and was there any lessons that you learned from that you've been able to apply to your day job, if you like?
That was a really fun part of my life. It happened where one of the producers from the show, was looking to bring a new dragon on board. And one of the things that they want to have of Dragon's Den is a mix of people who invest. So, one of the guys on the show is very technology focused, somebody's very environmentally focused, somebody's very retail focused, and I've kind of become known for somebody who invests in people. So they thought that would add a very interesting dimension to the panel, that somebody who's very people focused. So they reached out to me. I was a bit surprised. It's not what I do. It's not who I am. I'm a recruitment specialist. I run a recruitment business, not a TV personality. So I was a bit surprised, why would they want me to do something like that? So I went along, met the team, and they asked me to do a couple of days in the den to see whether it worked for me. And if I'm honest, Simon, it was an absolute laugh. I had a scream, just meeting founders, they're coming in with their pictures, etc. And it was just a lot of fun. So when I originally got into it, it was just seemed like a really fun and cool thing to do. I'd never done TV before. I had no idea what the impact of TV had, because I'd never experienced it. When the show then eventually aired and took off, I could not believe, because just in the UK alone, over 5 million people watched the show. The show then gets syndicated to 20 other countries, because it's made by the BBC, and the BBC has syndicates all over the world. And all of a sudden, to go from being just a recruitment guy to walking into a restaurant and people approaching you and having a selfie, or can I have your autograph, it was insane. Nothing I'd ever done before. So that was quite a fun kind of part of my life. Obviously, because of TV, it creates a brand, because as you know, people then get to know you. So all of a sudden, when I do a social media post where I may have got, 15 likes, I get 150,000 likes because people know you. So I think the brand has been extremely valuable when going out for a recruitment entrepreneur, looking for individuals to back, because all of a sudden you're known and people know your name. So I think it's been a very valuable part of my life and very valuable to the business.
You've enjoyed so much success, and that's clear. It comes through. But you will have had failures. You will have had errors of judgment, things you regret in a business context, and particularly maybe within the recruitment and staffing industry. Are there any things that you might want to highlight or share with us?
I think the most important thing is, every entrepreneur in recruitment, there is nobody that I've met, Simon, that gets it all right. Every year we experience different markets, different challenges. Throughout my career, if anything could have gone wrong, it's always gone wrong. That's for sure. Then, you experience recessions where the whole thing falls apart. As you know, recently we experienced a pandemic, something we've never experienced before, where our entire business shut down for a whole year. Have I hired people that have never made it? Absolutely. Have I invested in businesses that have failed? Absolutely. Have I invested sums of money where I've lost all my money? Absolutely. Have I entered countries too early, not knowing what I didn't know, and having to shut them down because corporate governance was way more than I thought? The answer to all of those questions is yes. The thing that I probably believe in the most is failure is part of the journey of success. I think I learn more when I fail than I succeed. Sometimes when you succeed, you kind of take it in your stride, but when you fail, you reflect, and how did that happen, and why did it happen? So actually, I embrace failure because I think I've probably failed more times than most, because I've probably done more different things, but actually it's been part of who I am, so I'm not afraid of it. And I think anybody watching this podcast, the thing that's probably the most valuable for me is don't fear it, because it's not happen anyway. We all make mistakes. We make decisions that don't work. The most important thing is to learn from those decisions.
I hear you. And just in terms of achievements, and that there's been a lot in the recruiting sector and outside of the recruiting sector. And I know some of the work you've done in charity and for government organizations and investments in businesses outside the recruitment sector. But if you could just highlight one achievement which you're just most proud of, what would that be?
I had a very unusual experience, Simon, where out of the blue I got approached by the UK government, and the UK government was going through some analysis of job creation. And one of the things that they realised over the next 20 years, one of the biggest challenges for most countries and most governments around the world is we're just not creating enough jobs. Technology is changing the way we work, it's making us more efficient, and it's actually cutting down the number of jobs that we create. So one of the challenges that the British government had was looking at that and saying, where are our new jobs going to come from? And at the time, the Prime Minister was David Cameron and Lord Young, and they together recognised that one of the ways of job creation is to start new businesses. Every time you start a business, you create a job, and every time you build a business, you scale. So they approached me and said, look, we've done Dragon's Den, we understand who you are. We want somebody to help stimulate the UK economy, and we want to foster a new generation of entrepreneurs, and we'd like somebody to kind of head a new initiative of entrepreneurship in the UK, and we'd love that to be you. So I was quite kind of flattered. The thing that I was a bit surprised about is, because I already had a job, I wasn't looking for another job to do, but this was a proper full-time role for 3 years, and they offered me £1 billion to go out and invest in businesses. So effectively, I would go out and look for entrepreneurs who wanted to set up their own business, but not in recruitment, but in every sector. So I launched a company called Startup Loans on behalf of the UK government. I was the founding chairman of that company. I built the organisation to over 100 people, and I was tasked with starting 1,000 businesses, which when I thought about it, I mean, how do you start 1,000 businesses? But recognising the challenge at hand, I built an amazing team, I built an amazing organisation, And when I stepped down after my 3-year stint, we'd created 28,000 businesses, employing over 108,000 people, which was probably one of the most exciting parts of my life and my journey. And at the end of it, to be invited to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen and to be given the commander of the British Empire, the CBE, was just such a cool experience. So that probably is something that stands out in my head, that my journey is taken me through.
Wow, fantastic. Were you allowed to invest in any of those businesses?
No, they said it's called conflict of interest.
Was it salaried, the role?
Unfortunately not, Simon.
So you did it for a Queen and country in those days, I guess.
Yeah, there was no pay and I couldn't invest. And basically, because I obviously asked that question, and they said, no, you're doing it for your country. This is about you giving back, about you stimulating other entrepreneurs and creating a legacy. And some of the businesses that we founded today are doing unbelievably well. So I suppose it was my way of giving back to a country and a community that's been so good to me.
Brilliant. Perhaps we can end the podcast with a kind of a future-proofing question. What worked in the past for you and in the recruitment industry? There's no guarantee it's going to work in the future. There's so many different macro factors that are impacting recruitment business these days, macroeconomic, geopolitical, and so forth, technology. I mean, what is your advice? Like, what needs to change, and how can recruitment entrepreneurs, people who have a business right now, maybe one day they have a plan to exit it in some shape or form, and what can they be doing now to make sure that they can future-proof their business, get through these recessions, and build something of real value that potentially buyers will be interested in?
I think when the market is very challenging, Simon, the first thing that I've always done is lead by example. Get in the trenches, get inside your business. When markets are difficult and you're faced with making tough decisions, it's always good to make decisions when you're on the ground and you really understand what's going on. So I think the first thing I would say, in all difficult times, I've always stepped back into the trenches of the business. Secondly, I think technology is transforming the way we work. I think artificial intelligence is going to radically change. So I think for most founders, embrace technology, understand what is happening in the market, and keep your finger on the pulse. In every country right now, there are challenges, whether economically or financially, or there's a recession coming, or cost of living crisis, But to be honest, we've seen this before. I've been through 4 recessions. I've been through a pandemic. The markets go up, and they come down. And you just got to weather that and make sure that you keep your finger on the pulse, that you manage your cost base well, you manage your revenue stream. And as a founder, when times are challenging, you need to be very close to your business.
James, thank you very much for being generous with your time and sharing these, what I think, and I'm sure the audience will feel, are very informative, very insightful comments on our industry. Thank you so much for joining us, and just want to wrap up by wishing you a great day. You're in a different time zone from me. I'm in Tokyo. I think you're in Monaco right now, but on the other side of the world, and have a great day ahead.
Monaco. Fantastic. Lovely being on your podcast, Simon, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good day.
You too.